to do. We are talking the meta horror comedy anthology movie Scare Package. Obviously a multitude of directors here and a large cast, including John Bloom, aka Joe Bob Briggs, of course, from the Last Drive-In. And this is a horror anthology movie that focuses a lot of its time on the cliches, the tropes that you'll see in horror movies, and tries to have both commentary and really a parody of all of these kind of these horror tropes that you would have seen, even parodied in movies themselves, in things like, you know, Scream and you know, that Cabin in the Woods and things like that. In fact, one of the stories is more or less, you could say, directly inspired by Cabin in the Woods. Now, we have a wraparound story. This all takes place in a VHS rental shop, and it's kind of cast of quirky characters, including the boss, his new employee, and somewhat of an obsessed customer. And then we were introduced into a variety of movies from that. Now, I'm not going to go through each movie. I will tell you about the two that I thought stood out. Primarily that is going to be the last movie, which I think is the most substantial, and I think the one that has the most direct links to parodying kind of horror tropes, because it does feel like it's directly inspired by Cabin in the Woods, where we have a number of you know, horror stock characters, you know, the jock, the slutty gal, etc., all seemingly kidnapped and being studied by some underground kind of organisation, very much like your you know, your Cabin in the Woods there. And then we have a masked serial killer on the loose, and gore and hilarity ensues, and obviously they must tackle a number of cliches and sort of tropes along the way. That was also that was quite fun, very well made, kind of certainly I think the biggest in scale, and it seemed to have the most depth to it. And it kind of links directly into the kind of the wraparound story as well. The other one I thought was quite good was this kind of again, it's probably it's also the most gory out of the ones that we have. It's these kind of campers that are in the woods, these two couples, and they're interrupted by a guy who seemingly is transforming into some type of creature, but there seems to be other things that maybe crop up as well. It almost plays a little bit like a fast, very gory, but it's kind of done in that sort of zany Peter Jackson kind of Sam Raimi sort of style, so it's not a particularly shocking film, if that makes sense. The gore is OTT and played for comedic effect. In fact, for example, we have this guy who's transforming into this werewolf, ends up getting some silver handcuffs on, and it kind of is stuck midway through the transformation in kind of like a gooey mess, and then just kind of calmly sort of talks to everyone whilst he's in that state, things like this. So there are some fun moments, and I thought those two films, out of all of them, kind of stood out the most, certainly. I'll talk briefly about some of the others. I mean, our first movie is called Cold Open, and this is kind of to do with the kind of the guy who, you know, is the kind of a minor character in a kind of horror film who kind of starts kind of things off. To me, it didn't really work. The joke was a little bit lost in sort of translation. I think maybe one of the issues I have with this anthology as a whole, it tries to be a little bit too clever for its own good to a certain degree, and I feel it almost becomes a parody of itself to a certain degree. I didn't think the whole point of this, it's called Cold Open, but you really don't know what's going on. I didn't think the first movie, and it's partly the point of it, but yeah, it didn't really kind of grab you until really the end, and I didn't think it was particularly good. And even then, I didn't think that one was particularly good. You've seen that sort of thing before. And some of the other kind of the movies, we have this kind of like this omega sign being burned on this kind of guy's head, and he kind of wakes up and possesses a kind of a girl's body who's trying to avoid spoilers. And I think it's meant to be a kind of a commentary on the internet and trying to avoid, you know, things on the internet. But again, I didn't feel it quite hit the mark there, to be honest with you. And there are a couple of other ones that were just plain weak in regards to just not particularly memorable. We have this kind of this help group for kind of men, and they all turn out to be werewolves. And again, the twist was a little bit lame on that one. So I think it's a real mixed bag, this horror anthology. The two that I mentioned really stand out as being very, very kind of fun, very kind of gory. And certainly I think are the most, the two that stood out for me were the most OTT, the most kind of, had the most kind of going on in regards to sort of special effects and certainly gore and also scale. Some of the other ones I mentioned were okay, but there are a couple of kind of weak and just forgettable ones as well. I do feel it plays very much like as a comedy as well. This movie shouldn't be taken seriously, but it does give it a fun vibe. I will say that I did enjoy the movie, and it does have a kind of a manic, gleefully weird sort of sense of humour that runs through the movie. And humour is going to be a little bit subjective. I actually found some of the jokes had a good kind of hit ratio, to be honest with you. And there's certainly a lot here for horror fans. Maybe I think it's potentially maybe a little too inside baseball. I mean, I think, for example, if you're looking at a movie like, say, Creepshow, probably the most well-known horror anthology, pretty accessible to anyone, whilst this one is very, really made for just the horror fans. I mean, I guess that's kind of who it's made for ultimately, but it doesn't have a lot of mainstream appeal, which is going to please some people. I understand that, but even for horror fans, I feel like being meta about meta movies, it's almost, I don't know, you'll get shades of Tucker and Dale, like I've said, Cabin in the Woods, Scream, and you feel like, okay, this has kind of been done, and I know that it's almost like commenting on those films now, so it's almost being, like I say, meta about meta films, but I don't think it's as clever as those ones. You certainly have, it takes the piss of the same kind of cliches, and that is kind of fun to see and have that, be reminded of that. But I don't think it's quite as clever. It doesn't do it quite as an imaginative way. It's a little bit more basic, I feel, in its kind of storytelling. But there's no denying this movie is quite a lot of fun, and with loads of kind of gory effects. Many of them kind of practical. The acting, to be quite honest with you, I thought was pretty good across the board here. A lot of them are kind of playing, very much your OTT, zany kind of characters. But I think it kind of goes with the kind of the horror comedy vibe here. I'm not the biggest fan of anthologies, if I'm honest, because I never really feel like you get a huge amount of kind of characterization. But I feel at least there's a reasonable amount of variety in this movie, I have to say, and it's certainly better than some of them I have seen kind of within recent years. Maybe a little insular, but I think for those who it's made for, certainly will enjoy. I'm going to give this one a slightly above average 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to you next time. I really enjoyed that last movie, though. That last one was pretty good. Anyway, thanks for watching, and bye for now.